Fine. All right, welcome to another episode of the Ari Lewis Show. We'll see if this episode goes on YouTube or not, but nevertheless, thank you for joining us. We have a great guest today. He's a well-known lecturer throughout Israel and also the United States. He has been heard on Arutz Sheva as well as Israel News Talk Radio, and also, of course, his own YouTube videos as well. It's a pleasure to welcome to the program Rabbi Kessin. Rabbi, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So, first thing I want to bring up with you is that we know this is a very strange government in Israel, really unique. Never had Arabs in the coalition before. We haven't had a prime minister walk around so publicly with a yarmulke, sort of, kind of that thing on his head, but it looks like it's coming to an end. We're headed towards elections. I want to get your thoughts on, first of all, if you're surprised the government has lasted as long as it has, because we had Dr. Mordechai Gadar. He didn't think it would last 2-3 months, and it's almost a year. And what do you see moving forward with the next elections coming up?
Well, you see, the problem that people have is they can see what's going on politically, but they don't understand the dynamics of the process from the standpoint of the divine agenda. That's why. It's like, I use this as an example, it's like a 3-star general that went with his nephew to a restaurant, and they were talking, let's say about the Vietnam War, back 50 years ago, whatever, right? And the nephew said, and he was a reporter for the, let's say, New York Times, he says, I know what you guys' strategy are. So the general says, okay, tell me. She starts saying this, the reason for this battle is because of this, and so on. So the general laughs. So the nephew says, why are you laughing? He says, your problem is you read the accounts and you think that the newspapers know what they're talking about. They don't. Here's what I'll do. Since you're my nephew, I'm going to take you to the Pentagon, right? And we're going to go down 5 floors. I don't know if that's the truth, but, just as an example. And he does that, and they walk out of the elevator, 5th floor below, and there's the war room. And the war room has this huge map. And you have all these little push pins, right? And he says, come on over here, the general says to his nephew. And he says, okay, he comes over, and he's taking a look at all these little pins, and he says, aha, now I understand. This battle wasn't the objective. It was really a diversion so something else can happen. What does all this mean? Because what's the inner dynamics, the real purpose. You only know that if you go into the war room. You don't know that if you read the New York Times and so on. Because they're not going to reveal, the army's not going to reveal the real strategies. Same thing. What you're looking is the movements of men, events. And you think that you know the reasons for this, but you don't realize that God runs the world, and everything has an outcome, you see, based on a divine plan. So if you don't know the divine plan, you don't know what's really going on. I mean, you could see what's going on, but you don't understand what is really happening and why. So you have to have knowledge. So what you're looking at, what everybody looks at is based on the observation. Well, this is what's happening. But they don't understand really what's going on. And I'll give you an example, like the question you just asked. Right? Can you repeat the question?
Basically, what do you see happening moving forward with the elections? And are you surprised the government's lasted this long?
No. And the reason for that is because you don't understand why the government even exists in this fashion. Then you can ask, well, how long is the government going to exist for this purpose? But you don't know the purpose for the existence of this government. So that question is really a question you really can't answer until you know why this type of government was allowed by God. Remember, there's only one vote that counts, and that's God's. Everybody else goes along for this show. It's a sideshow. Nobody understands that. So that's the question you have to answer. Why does God want a government of anti-religious people? And it was. It was one of the worst governments in the history of Israel that was anti-religious. Between whatever the guy's name is, Matan Kahana, I think that's his name, or between Lapid and Lieberman and Bennett and all these characters, Why did God allow them to rule his people? The Jewish people are not just people, they are the princes. The whole world stands on their ability to rectify creation, right? So it's paramount. Why did God allow these people who mean that have such evil intent to rule over his children? That's the question you have to ask. Once you get that answer, then you can ask, okay, how long will this decree happen? Because when will its purpose be fulfilled? You see how it's a whole different understanding, and it's an entirely different way of thinking. You see?
So then the question now is...
What's the purpose?
Yes.
Aha. Okay. So now we're getting to the root. First I have to introduce you to the proper way of looking at it. You know, if you're a Torah observant Jew and you believe that God runs the world, that's the form the question has to take. Got it?
Okay.
Okay.
So...
Now, the answer.
Yes.
The answer. You ready for this?
Yes.
It's a little long-winded.
All right.
It's going to pay off.
Okay.
Okay? There's a Gemara in Sanhedrin that says the following. 1, it says that Amen David Bo, the Messiah, the son of David, will only come under one of two circumstances. 1, either all the Jewish people are sinning, or they're all righteous. Kulam Chayavim or Zakoim. Now, that's an astounding Gemara. I can understand if they're all righteous. Well, the reason why the Messiah comes, because they all are meritorious, merit. But you're going to tell me that the Messiah, Ben David, comes because they're all sinning? Does that make sense? Right?
Not really.
Not really, right? And that's an understatement, right? But the idea is the Gemara is revealing a profound secret. What is the secret? Okay. That when the world reaches, so if it's meritorious, everybody's righteous, that makes sense. Because then the Jewish people will have done what's called the tikkun. They will have brought God back by doing all the mitzvahs, however long it takes. But it's the meritorious act that they've done that brings the Messiah. But what happens if everybody's sinning? It doesn't mean literally everybody, but the overwhelming majority of Jews are sinners. The Messiah comes. Wow. You know, that doesn't look like a heavy punishment to me. It looks like a reward, you know. And the answer is very important. Because when all the Jews are basically sinning, the world has entered the level of zoyama. Of zoyama means the pollution, or deviation, or distortion, or corruption, at the 49th level of tumah, of corruption. That's the lowest level you can get. So at that point in time, God says, wait a minute, if the world drops into the 50th, bad news. Because the world cannot sustain itself when the evil that is being done, right, is at the level of the 50th level of Zoyabo, which is the 50th level of tumah, defilement or pollution. Therefore, I'm going to press the restart button. I'm going to end the world, because it won't survive. It's so close to the end, I got to end this. Right? Makes sense. When did that happen? Right? So, in the Mabul, the days of the flood, the world was so corrupted, right? It was so corrupted and so evil. It was such a destruction of civilization that God said, I got to press the restart button. Because if these guys fall into the 50th gate of tumah, of defilement and pollution and distortion and corruption, then society cannot exist. They can't. And the world was completely homosexual, as I mentioned. The decree was, right? The Medrash says that why was the world, what sealed the fate of the world at the time of Noah? And the answer is, what sealed the fate was that it says, which is incredible, that if a man would marry a man or an animal, he would have to write a ksuba, a legal document recognizing the obligations, the legal obligations of one to the other. What, are they crazy?
Like he'd have to provide for his animal?
Well, exactly. You got to provide for your wife. You got to live with your wife, right? Or
if they get a divorce, you got to pay the dog.
Exactly. You have to pay exactly. Which is quite absurd, right? So that type of decree will destroy civilization, obviously. So God said, I got to press the restart button, end it. That's why. Very important concept. When was the next time the world, or the Jewish world, reached the Memtes? Egypt.
That's right.
Memtes Shai Tumah.
Right.
And if they would have fallen into the Nun, into the 50th gate of defilement, right, then they could not have been redeemed. Right? And they were at the 49th. So what did God do? We know that when that happens, it's a kulam chayavim, right? That God has to press the restart button. How? He didn't destroy them, right? But what he did is he pressed the restart button. Mashiach. The Mashiach is a restart button where he's going to end the whole program. You see? Who was that? Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu is a Mashiach, specifically the Mashiach ben Yosef. And he comes when the Jews are on the 49th level of Tumah, defilement. It's incredible. That's exactly what the Gemara says. Kulam Chayom. And Moshe Rabbeinu is Mashiach ben Yosef, is a Messiah. And therefore the world, that's the restart button. It's amazing. That's why. That's why the redemption happened. Because it was really the concept of Kulam Chayom, and therefore you have to press, like I say, the restart button. But here's the problem. The Sultan. The Sultan gets up there and says, wait a minute. I understand that, the Jews are sinning terribly, Avodah Zarah, idol worship and all that. I understand that. And therefore, if they fall into the Nun, the 50th, bad news. Right? So I understand you want to start it all over again. But you can't start it over with Messiah, because the Messianic era is an unbelievable era of unbelievable benefit. I mean, this is not justice, because they don't deserve it. It's like a guy, who robs banks left and right, and all of a sudden, and he's murdering people, and all of a sudden the government says to him, we like what you're doing, we'll give you $100 million because of a reward. Excuse me, what? So God says to the Sultan, you're right, because the Sultan's job is to defend justice. And the Sultan is saying there's no justice here, right? So God says, you're right. So what I have to do is I have to make them so severely suffer pain that it will raise the bar, it will level out and satisfy justice. That's why as soon as Moshe Rabbeinu came, Paro said, they're lazy, let them gather straw at night, right? That means the Jews are busy making bricks in the day and gathering straw all throughout Egypt. And they didn't have flashlights. Can you imagine what it is to look for straw in the middle of the night? The whole night. They suffered like this for months. That was an unbelievable intensification of punishment. And that satisfied justice. And then when justice was satisfied, what did God do? He turned to Moshe and said, okay, wipe them out. Because now they deserve the messianic process. And therefore, now they deserve it, and so on. And whatever, he would have ended it, and if not for the sin of the golden calf, which I'm not going to get into. But in any case, so that's the logic of why the Gemara says when the level of when Kulam Chayom, when they're all sinning, that's the logic of, that's when Ben David comes, and Messiah comes. You see? Fabulous.
All right, this is another episode of the Ari Lewis Show, and our guest today is Rabbi Kessin. So, Rabbi, bring up Mashiach, and it does look like that we're close to Mashiach. And one of the things I want to bring up with you is that we had a guest on about a year ago named Rabbi Tuvi Sinner. He is not in favor of people trying to predict when Mashiach comes. He says that we should not be doing that. And I brought up with him, I said, but there are big rabbis who've done that throughout history. So I want to get your thoughts on if it is permissible to bring up this idea that we think Mashiach is coming soon, certain dates, after Shmini Tigir, Sukkot, that kind of thing. So can you tell us more about that?
Well, you cannot, what you shouldn't do is give a definitive time.
Okay.
That's wrong. Because the truth is, nobody knows. There's only 3 people, or I should say 2 people in history that knew the definite time. And that was Yaakov Avinu, and he wasn't revealing that, right? Because the divine spirit left him. And Daniel, as we see in Daniel, where the angel told him in a time and times and a half, whatever that means, and that's a code, nobody knows, and so on. Those are the only 2 people who knew when the Mashiach really is coming. In other words, that's the end of the tikkun process. So you can't give a date, because you're going to always be wrong. Or you certainly, and because the problem is if he doesn't come on that date, then everybody becomes despondent, right, and says, he's not coming, so let's give it up. You see? However, you can predict when Mashiach, is likely to come, because we've ended the times that is predicted before his coming. I mean, the proof of that is the Gemara in Sotah or Sanhedrin, where they actually say what it's going to look like at the end of time. So how do they do that? Because they're not saying when he's going to come. They're going to say this is the climate that is going to happen before he comes. So that we're allowed to do. And right now we look like we're in the climate, right before he comes. That's permitted. That's not a definitive date, you see? So besides, there's a Zohar, right? There's a Zohar that says the following, that the Tchias HaMesim, resurrection of the dead, is going to occur 210 years before the end of time. Now the end of time, which is the year 6000, is the English year 2240. If you subtract 210 years, when right before that, that's when the resurrection of the dead happens. And that happens to be 2030, which is less than 8 years from now. Right? Zohar says that. In any case, it's an argument, but that's what it says. In any case. And that's number one. So now, the resurrection of the dead occurs after Mashiach ben David. So ben David has to come first. That's the Messiah. And then you have Tchias HaMesim. And Tchias HaMesim will continue for 210 years. Everybody gets up at his time. They don't all get up at one time. That's what it's really saying. And before that, you have Mashiach ben Yosef. Right? So we are really, according to the Zohar, we are what? Less than 8 years away? And the Gemara brings a proof in Gemara. It's a Talmud Yerushalmi in Masechta Ma'aser Sheni that the Beis Hamikdash will be built, the third one, before Mashiach ben David arrives. So we're looking at, wow, it's like we're right up against it. You see? So based on that, then we take a look at the acceleration of the process, what is going on today, right, is really an account, parallels what it says in the Gemara of the climate before Mashiach comes.
Which would be the climate, what is going on in the world. What would be some examples, though, that Mashiach is coming based on the climate?
Well, there's certain things that have to happen before Mashiach comes. I just told you one of them. Justice has to be satisfied. In other words, the world is reaching what's called a Mendel Shaitanah. We now live in this world of 49 levels of degradation, of corruption, and so on. Right? And if you think about that, on June 26, 2015, right, the Supreme Court issued a law that you cannot discriminate based on same-sex marriage. That's a legalization of homosexuality. Isn't that the exact reason why the Nobel happened? This is it. You can't overturn something that's constitutional, only if you have state legislatures, the majority, and so on, which of course they're not going to do. So it comes out that we are replicating exactly the time of the Nobel. And God pressed the restart button, right? So what was the restart button then? We know God presses the restart button, which is either wipe the world out or bring the Mashiach. America has just replicated the Nobel, the flood, right? With that issue of the Supreme Court. And from then, we know America is going bonkers with their sexual perversions and deviations. You can't even use you can determine your biological sex. I don't want to go into all the incredible, insane ideas of what is happening. You have to watch your pronoun, you get kicked out of school. I mean, it's like beyond, but it's an Alice in Wonderland land. What can I tell you, But where was the restart button? That's the interesting thing. And you know what the restart button was? And most people have no concept of this. The restart button is something that has to happen before Mashiach comes. And it started. What is that restart button? That Edom will do tshuva.
Right.
Who is Edom? Trump.
Right.
Trump is really a messianic figure of the Goyim, of Edom. Edom, who was Edom? You had Esau, the brother of Yaakov. Esau became Edom, the Torah says. Edom, the Gemara says, is Rome. Rome is Western civilization, right? And Western civilization is divided into three parts. One of the parts is called America, right? And so on. So therefore, America is the best part of Edom. It's called the Tev Sheba Esau, the good part of Esau. You see? And Trump came down that escalator on June 16th, 10 days before they issued that directive, that law, right? And he declared his candidacy. And I don't want to go into the whole thing, but one of the things that has to happen is, and God promises, that Esau, which is the originator of Edom, will repent and assist Jacob to do the tikkun, to do the rectification. Trump. So about a month after Trump declared candidacy, I realized, I said, wait a minute, this is what's happening. This is the restart button. And Trump is therefore going to be the best thing ever happened to Israel because it's Esav doing tshuva, right? And that's exactly what happened. He's the greatest president in the assistance of Israel. That was the restart button because that only happens before the Mashiach comes. See, that Edom or Esav is going to do tshuva. So Trump, who even has red hair and all the red stuff and the red ties and everything else, he did tshuva. People say to me, wait a minute, what do you mean Trump did tshuva? He's this, he's that. I said, you don't understand something. He has a lot of the characteristics of Esav, but there's one characteristic he does not have, and that's the tshuva. Esav was a fraud. Esav was a tremendous Baal Gaiva, arrogant, right? And he was a tremendous Baal Taiva. He loved married women, and I mean to steal them, right? But he was dishonest. Fraud, the imposter. Do I have to take a tithe from salt? All that stuff. Trump, I'm not going into his characteristics, but Trump is an honest guy. Therefore, he differs from Esav in his integrity, his honesty. And he is, And therefore, that's the midah. That's the characteristics that he's going to tshuva. And that happened 10 days before the decree, the law decree of the Supreme Court. I mean, the timing is impeccable. It's astounding that this happened 10 days before the Supreme Court decided, which of course means they took up the case months before. But why, and therefore, but what's the problem? What is the problem? The way God wants to end everything is how? Is by starting the Messianic process. What was the problem when Moshe Rabbeinu came to take the Jews out of Egypt? That they don't deserve it. Where's the justice for this? So God had to intensify the suffering to bring up to the level, right? And that's when I realized something. So I was constantly saying, this is clearly what's happening. But then I realized that, wait a minute, God wants to kick out Trump and make the Jewish world, and the whole world actually, because they will benefit too, suffer terribly, right? So who did God pick? The worst president in U.S. history, Biden. Wait a minute, you can't win against Trump. The economy is incredible. I mean, Trump is one of the greatest presidents in terms of what he did for the United States. Forget about his character. Look at his competence. That's what people in America don't understand, But how are you going to kick out Trump? He's fabulous as a president. You want to put in Biden? He'll never go. So God said, watch what I do. What did he do? COVID. So COVID allowed Biden to campaign from his basement. So nobody knew how retarded he should say, or what a buffoon the guy was, So he concealed, behind COVID, Biden was concealed. That's number one. Not only that, Biden was able to blame, so that, not only that, but number two, it destroyed the economy.
Right.
So there's his signature, you see? All because of COVID. And number three, it allowed the mail-in ballots, right? Because you couldn't go because of COVID, so you mailed it in. And that allowed fraud. You see? So what COVID did is it allowed Biden to get in. But what would that serve? You see? Because Biden is an incredible candidate. What the candidate, what the main requirement is that God needs, remember, he has to satisfy justice before he brings a Mashiach, right? So therefore, he chose Biden. So God kicked out Trump and put in Biden. But how's Biden going to increase the suffering? Because it's interesting. Biden was voted as the dumbest guy in the Senate. And the dumbest guy is law class, whatever, right? So God needed a guy, right, that's really stupid. Why? So he would be somebody's puppet. So he became the puppet of the progressives, the Democratic Party. And that is the evil of Esav, you see? So that's why Biden is president. So he can be manipulated like a puppet by these people, the Democratic Party, right? The progressives, the liberals, right? All these people. He can be manipulated, and therefore he can make America suffer. And then he's destroying America. I mean, gas is $5. The southern border is being destroyed. The crime is all over the place. I mean, it's just incredible to watch. America is falling apart, you see? Because God has to satisfy justice. right? So right now, God is on a campaign to destroy America, but he won't. It'll continue for a certain amount of time, and then Trump will come back and resume the process, which will then continue and not end. You see what happens.
So again, this is another episode of the Arlo Show, and what's interesting is I listened. Yes.
Wait, one more thing.
Yeah.
And just like God has to satisfy justice in America by intensifying the tremendous pain, he has to allow the Erev Rav, those Jews that want to destroy Judaism, the justice says, wait a minute, well, everybody's sinning. Why can't my guys take over? You see, so God said, okay. So that's why the Erev Rav, the worst kind, has been able to lead the Jewish people in Israel to satisfy justice. You see, same thing. In fact, it's incredible that it's simultaneously happening with what's happening in America. America's falling apart, and Israel is falling apart. Exact same thing. Because when Mashiach comes, he has to satisfy, justice has to be satisfied before. But the important thing to do is to watch. They're both collapsing. You see, and that's what I said. Why are they there in the first place? Right? And the answer is to satisfy justice and to make everybody suffer. But if they're collapsing, it means that the suffering has been satisfied. It's just like in Egypt. When it ended, the Moshe Rabbeinu turned around and there was blood all over the place. The 10 Makkos. That's exactly what's happening in the world. In America, which is Edom, and also the Erev Rav, which is Israel. Both are suffering terribly, but they're both collapsing. I think the approval rating of Biden is now, 35% or something like that?
It's hard to believe it's that high.
I know. And you know what the funny thing is, I can't believe 35%. Who are these guys, crazy?
Maybe they're all related to it or something.
Yeah, obviously the gas is $5. Well, like how
what do you like about it, right?
Exactly. But the answer is because it's not that they like him; they hate Trump so much.
Right.
They'd rather suffer. They're all what do you call masochists? That's what they are.
Well, see, I was a little weird out because when you were talking about Trump 2015, I remember that at that time when he was running, people thought it was a publicity stunt, and you did not think that.
No,
you did not. You knew he was going to win.
It took me a month to figure it out.
Right.
Then I realized, wait a minute, because most people don't know that Asa does tshuva. That's the problem. Asa became evil, but the prediction of the nevuah, the prophecy is Rav Yavod Tzoir. The older will serve the younger. So what happened was, because Esav sinned, the older does serve the younger, like Yitzchak said to Esav, that when they sin, you will punish them. So you are doing the job of kapara for Yaakov and his descendants. You see? But eventually, because of the prophecy, he has to return to what he originally was set out to do, and that's to help Yaakov do the tikkun. That's tshuva. That's why that has to happen before.
So if people out there are thinking that you're crazy for thinking Trump's coming back, they should realize that people thought you were crazy back in 2015 when you said he was going to win.
I was the only guy. Then later on, people began to see, figure it out. But Biden was about a month later, and then finally I said, I can't just keep this to myself. And I began to say this, and everybody thought, impossible. Trump was running against 16 guys.
High-ranking Republicans.
Each one had tremendous name recognition. And he was a comedian, so everybody said, this is great. Now we have some comic relief in the presidency, But I knew no. Because somehow I knew, you can feel, it's interesting when you speak to Trump, you have to look past, there's obviously flaws and whatever. But if you look at him and you just look at it, not biased, you can feel his honesty, I remember there was an interview I heard, and it was on the radio, and he was being interviewed by a woman, I don't recall her name. So she said, well, you're running for president, what happens if you win? It's going to affect your business. You got to disconnect from your businesses because of the conflict of interest and all that. So she said to him, why do you want to do that? Good question.
Yeah.
You know what he answered? And I felt his essence that this was, what he was saying was true. What he said was, what do you mean? I've accomplished a tremendous amount, but can you imagine being president of the United States, how much good I can do for America? And when he said that, it was true. He was saying what he felt. You see, that's tshuva. He really wants to do it to help America, which he did. That's why he was such an incredible president, you see? And that in many ways. So that's why he's chosen. But he's chosen for other reasons, I hold he's an incarnation of Marcus Aurelius Antoninus.
Oh, wow.
That's a whole thing. He's a Gilgal of that. And I go into that, but it's a whole understanding of who Marcus Aurelius was.
Was this part of the reason why that so many people hated him? Because I recall all the talk shows, Seth Meyers show had every single night ripping on him.
Correct.
Okay.
And let me tell you why they hate him. You are looking at something that never happened in American history. People hate him. It's a visceral hatred. We're not talking about a guy, I disagree with his policies. No. It's much worse than that. It's like there's a mongoose, I think it's called the mongoose, hates the cobra. They're bitter natural enemies. As soon as they look at each other, they want to kill each other. These people, they hate Trump viscerally. You can explain it also. Because Trump, his main incredible characteristic, he's a defiant person. He won't listen to anybody, he does what he wants. And people hate that. And he's the greatest threat to the establishment. Because he's going to knock them over. He's defiant. He's not afraid of anybody. He's got billions of dollars. He's not worried about what these guys are going to think. That's the natural reason why they hate him. But they really hate him because of this. Because as we come to the end, the Satan is dying. You see, the Satan is dying because as we get closer to the Messianic era, the Satan is losing all. I don't want to get into the whole mechanism, but he's losing his strength. He is losing his strength. You see, his power, and so on. So therefore, he's got to get the Jews to sin, or else he won't make it. The Satan derives his power from the sins of the Jews. Without going into the whole, it's called his yoneh. The Satan eats from the sins of the Jews. He can take the divine flow to himself. Without getting into the whole mechanism. Okay, now, therefore, when the Jew sins, the Satan can eat from that holiness that the Jews brings down. So if the Jews does the mitzvah, then the holiness, it's called the shefa of kedusha, goes to the Jew. But when the Jew sins, then whatever kedusha he would bring down does not go to him, it goes to the Satan. And that powers the nations of the world. It's an incredible mechanism, and that's responsible for the whole historical movement. Now, but when it comes to the end of time, all this energy that the Satan has, which is holiness, he has to give back to the Jewish people or to the side of holiness. Therefore, he's dying. So the Satan must get everybody to sin, especially the Jewish people. And the problem is, so what does he do? So he's got to get the evil of Esav. They're represented by the Democratic Party, Obama, and all this stuff, right? He's got to get them to stop the possibility that the Jews are going to reign supreme. Trump is the greatest enemy of the Satan. That's who he really is. Because he wants to help the Jews do the tikkun. Stop the Arabs, right? Give all the land back. That's what he's really doing. He's giving all the legitimacy to the Jewish people, the Golan, Jerusalem, the whole country, and so on, which is incredible, you see? And the Satan has to stop him because he doesn't want the Jews to recapture the religion. So he's got to stop Trump. And how does he stop them? By influencing him in his power as the Yetzer Hara, because he's the Yetzer Hara, he's the evil inclination. So he can enter your mind and present arguments. That's what he is, that's what a Yetzer Hara is. He enters your psyche, and he can actually influence you. So he has entered the psyche of America, right? And all those people who hate Trump is because it's satanic. The Satan is inducing them to hate this man because their hatred is an obsession. It's almost psychotic. It doesn't make sense. I mean, you want to argue with the guy, his position, his policies. Yeah, but why do you hate the guy so much? I mean, their guys, 35%. They even prefer Biden with $5 gas. And the country fall apart in terms of crime, the southern border, right? And energy depletion, everything. They'd rather have Biden, right, than have Trump. That's how much they hate the guy. But what explains it? So you can explain it, like I said, you can explain it in terms of the fact that he's a defiant person against the establishment, fine. But the real hatred is satanic. You're looking at the Satan actively trying to destroy Trump. That's why when you ask yourself, okay, the guy's no more president. Why are you still going after him?
Right.
They still trying to sue the guy. It's like, when does the hatred stop? And the answer is it doesn't stop. Why? Because he's going to become president in 2024. So the Sultan still has to do his campaign. I got to stop this guy. Not just then. I got to stop him in 2024 from being a candidate. So it's a non-stop temptation in the mind of psyche, in the mind of the evil of Edom, of America, to destroy Trump. It's all, but the same campaign is continuing. You see. So it's satanic. And the Sultan, as his power of the Yetzer Hara, is able to enter the psyche of 35% of America, or whoever, the never Trumpers and all that, and influence them, because the Yetzer Hara is incredible, right? To hate Trump. It's all bizarre, and it's not natural. You see.
So you're talking about Trump doing Teshuvah. So, for example, obviously we know he was in the Kotel. He's the first active president to be at the Kotel about 5 years ago. Right. And also there's a midrash about Esav's head falling into the cave of Machpelah.
Exactly. That's a sign of Teshuvah.
Okay, so...
But it's more than that.
Okay.
One of the animals that represents Esav is the Chazar.
Right.
And the Chazar becomes kosher in the Messianic era.
Right.
There you are, because he did Teshuvah.
So I need to ask you a controversial question, which I never discussed before. That's why I'm excited to ask you this. Trump is supposed to help Esav do Teshuvah. Wasn't Obama supposed to help the Muslims do Teshuvah?
Yes, I say that.
Yes.
Obama was chosen because not only does Esav do Teshuvah, Yishmael does Teshuvah. And Yishmael did Teshuvah. Esav didn't do it, he almost did it.
Right.
Trump almost did Teshuvah when he met Yaakov Avinu and he kissed him instead of killing him.
What do you mean Esav?
I mean Esav, yeah.
Freudian slip.
Yeah, right? But Yishmael did Teshuvah.
Right.
Because the rabbis say, because he allowed Yitzchak to go first.
Right.
And Avraham Avinu died, So Yishmael did, so therefore Yishmael has to do Teshuvah also at the end of time. And that's what's happening, right? You have the Abraham Accords.
Trump, but yes.
No, but this is Yishmael doing Teshuvah.
Right.
Right? And then you have Mohammed bin Salman, right? He's very good friends with, what's his name, Jared Kushner. Yeah, no. And he really wants to get together with Israel. Except his father, the king, is still looking out for the Palestinians. He's prevented. But this is why there's a change in the Arab world. The Arab world now recognizes that Israel is not the enemy, right? It's Iran that's the enemy, and the Palestinians, they just gum up the works. It's just astounding what they're doing, But they eventually will all come back to Israel. Not only that, but they need Israel technologically. I mean, they're all begging for the technology of Israel. It's incredible. And the waters, what do you call it?
Sanitation.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, Israel's got it all. And these guys are they're still back in the 500 years ago, So that's happening. Yishmael is doing Teshuvah. And the Abraham Accords is unbelievable. Nobody expected this. What's interesting is Trump should have gotten the Nobel Prize.
Yes.
He didn't. Of course not. Because the Sultan will make sure he can't get the Nobel Prize because then everybody's going to imitate him.
There's a show, the John Oliver Show, which does a lot about Trump. And years ago, when Trump mentioned that Jared Kushner was to be in charge of making peace in the Middle East, people were laughing at him.
Yeah, because it's never been done.
But he did the best. He did better than any president.
Everybody.
Jared Kushner, they made fun of him. They make him sound like he's not that smart, but listen, he's a brilliant man.
Oh yeah, of course he is. Yeah.
So is that part of the satanic energy to make Jared look like he's a buffoon and stuff when...
Anybody associated with Trump, the Sultan will go after. Everybody. And that's what's happening with the January 6th.
Right.
It's absolutely absurd. Because all it is to stop Trump in 2024. Because the whole thing makes no sense. There was no insurrection. There wasn't even any guns in the place. How can you have an insurrection without weapons? What, are they retarded? And not only that, Trump himself said, I want you to have 10,000 National Guard guys. You mean if he was planning an insurrection, why would he invite 10,000 National Guards? I mean, it's obvious. I know what are these guys, fools? They are. They're all fools. And they don't care what the MS is. The real bizarre isn't even them. It's not Pelosi or Schumer, You know what really comes out looking bad? The American people. How do they put up with this stupidity? I mean, what is this? Is this justice? Of course not. Man wants to have 10,000 National Guard, and it's documented that and Pelosi's the one who turned them down. Everybody sees what's fair and right. No guns, there was a riot, but not an insurrection. Because the whole intent is obvious. They want to so besmirch the man. They want to prevent him from becoming 2024 president. You can't believe the fear that they have of Trump.
So you insist he is going to be president 2024?
I don't insist anything.
Okay.
I'm nobody to insist anything.
Okay.
I feel and predict that he will be the... Why? Because he's merely going to continue what was stopped in order to satisfy justice. Same thing with Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu was a Mashiach, came to power, and power told him to get lost. It made it much worse for the Jewish people. And then when the time that justice is satisfied, then God turned to Moshe Rabbeinu, was the Messiah. He says, okay, your time has come, wipe them out. He did.
But the reason our party was raised up is because 2020 we definitely at bare minimum saw some strange things with the election results. Michigan, Trump was up 700,000 votes and most of that went away. So how could that be fixed the next time?
Look, you need to have active supervision. First of all, you have to make laws that make sense. Like Georgia, they wanted identity cards. And Biden is saying, well, it's all racism. Hey, the guy's an idiot. What does racism have to do with the fact that you need to identify that you're an American citizen, or you are who you say you are, and so on, You need to change the laws that make sense. That's number one. Number two, you need to have supervision. Then none of this would happen. Really? And it's obvious. The guy, there was a movie that was just made, 2,000 Mules or something like that. The documents that people were stuffing the boxes with Biden. I don't even know all the irregularities and anomalies, but it was clearly, there are many states that should have gone for Trump, and they didn't, because of the irregularities, the dishonesty, and so on. They're afraid to make a real investigation. And I love what the Supreme Court, and by the way, I'll tell you something which also is very interesting. What's happened lately? It's interesting. Besides the fact that Schumer threatened Kavanaugh, which he should have been thrown out of the Senate. Imagine one branch of government threatening another branch of government. We've ever heard of something like that. And he's a leader of the Senate.
And he's a fellow Jew.
You're a Jew, right? They should have thrown him out. You know what a violation of ethics that is? For Schumer to threaten a Supreme Court justice? You've unleashed a wild storm, whatever the guy said, and you don't even know what's going to come. Meanwhile, I heard they just took away Roe versus Wade, which is a very good sign, by the way. But I wanted to say, what was the original question? Oh, you notice that the Supreme Court has tremendously been diminished in respect?
Yeah, I would say that.
Sure. Yeah, people are campaigning in front of Kavanaugh's house and Will Gorsuch's house. People are, they're laughing at the Supreme Court, they don't know what they're doing. Schumer's threatening the Supreme Court. Well, that's a diminishment in the honor and respect of the Supreme Court. Why? Interesting question. Which it never happened in American history, right? That they should lose the respect of as the lawgiver, not the givers, but the one who defend the law in American history, that they're threatened. Half America thinks the Supreme Court is out of their mind. Certainly all the people that want to do Roe versus Wade. Why did that happen? Do you know why? I'll tell you something very interesting. I believe this is true. Because what is the purpose of the Supreme Court? You should know one thing. There are 7 Noahide laws. One of them, the 4th one, is justice. That the world has to have courts where the nations of the world run through laws, and what supports the laws or judges the laws is the judiciary, right? The Supreme Court is the ultimate judiciary in terms of the Constitution of the United States, right? That's what they are. Yeah, but what are they really, when you think about that? Pennsylvania, Arizona, if I remember correctly, not Arizona, Texas, petitioned the Supreme Court. And they said, wait a minute, Pennsylvania is illegal what they did. Because the Secretary of State and the governor, right, changed the voting laws. But that's illegal because the Constitution says the only one who can change the voting laws is the state legislatures, right? That's what they said. So their vote was illegal, right? So that's unconstitutional because it says in the Constitution the only one who can change the laws of voting is the state legislatures. But the governor can't do it. The Supreme Court justice can't do it. And the Secretary of State of Pennsylvania can't do it. So therefore, as far as we're concerned, what they did was illegal or unconstitutional. And that affects our votes, Texas. Right? Because we voted against that. So what did the Supreme Court do? Nothing. They said, well, you have no standing. Are you crazy? We have no standing. They just pulled off a stunt which is unconstitutional, which affects the outcome of the election. So Texas is saying, what was the whole point of our vote? And you're telling us we have no standing? What does that mean? So God said, which is interesting, you guys are appointed to support the law of the United States, which is a requirement of B'nai Noach, right? You guys want to make a mockery of the law? I'm going to destroy your respect of the American people, measure for measure.
Again, this is another episode of the Ari Lewis Show, and we're joined today by Rabbi Kessin. So I want to touch a little bit back about the concept of Ishmael doing teshuva, because that's something that's going to happen anyway. But if Obama was supposed to do that, help them do teshuva and not, then what's Obama's role at this point?
Obama's a very interesting person. I mean, he's really a very bright guy, you know. But the problem with Obama, he's a megalomaniac. I don't know if you can call him a megalomaniac, but he's clearly an egomaniac. Well, there's a difference, by the way. Because megalomaniacs are psychotic. Egomaniacs are just, terrible. But anyway, and when Obama fell in love with himself, he's a narcissist. He loves himself. And the problem is that he is such a covet mensch. He's such a person that pursues honor and money and everything, that he just got influenced. In terms of that, he felt that it's more important to pursue the honor of the Arab world than it is to help the Jews. You see, he was bribed. The second problem with Obama is that he's a Muslim. I don't care what he says, you know, and that's why he kissed the hand of the Saudi Arabia, king, because he's really a Muslim. His father was a Muslim.
Right, according to Muslim law.
And he went to Islam school in Hawaii for many years. So he's really a closet Muslim, even though he's in the church, you know. So the problem is because of that, he was a perfect spokesman to bring justice, which means to say to the Muslims, what are you guys doing? You know, Israel is a real country. The UN recognizes them to sovereignty. You can't just decide to wipe them off the map. So he actually could have reversed, because the American president, God gave him unbelievable power, tremendous, to do this. Why? Well, not why, because he was appointed to be a messiah of Ishmael. It's interesting. What power did God give him? First of all, when he ran, they all looked at him like a messiah. You know, he was not elected. He was coronated to be the messianic figure. Who ever heard of something like that? Well, what is that supposed to mean? Not only that, he won both houses.
Right.
You know what power that is? Everybody looks at him like he's the Messiah, right? And he wins both houses. What power? So he easily could have dictated the terms, ultimately, for the Arabs. That's what really Trump did eventually. He's put his foot down. And they realized, hey, we got to get on America's side, you know, for Iran purpose, to prevent Iran and so on, you know. So he could have actually changed a great deal what was happening in the Middle East. But he failed. Same thing, he was bribed. He was bribed by his narcissism, by his arrogance, and by the fact that he's a Muslim. And that's it. Just like Esav was bribed by the Yetzer Hara and he became evil.
But at this point, is he, I guess, part of the satanic energy against Trump, like threatening Trump moving forward?
Correct, yes. Because he's incredibly jealous of what Trump did. Why? Because what Obama needs is a legacy. And Obama was a very poor president. Very. And the incredible thing is Trump came along and he undid, by executive order, everything that Obama did. And Obama hates him for that. Of course. Here is the most important thing, is a legacy of being a great president. And we all know he was a very poor president, really. Not only that, but along comes Trump, right? And he overturns through executive order everything that Obama did. Because whatever Obama did had nothing to do with the Congress. He did it by executive order, so it could be overturned by the next president.
The most amount of executive orders in history, Obama.
What was that?
Obama had the most amount of executive orders in history.
Yeah, he just ignored the Congress.
I think it was all presidents combined.
And he could, because that's the only way he could get over the Congress.
Right.
Meanwhile, along comes Trump with his executive orders, right? And cancels out. So I always say it's very funny because then Manager Obama says, you know, they want to build a museum, a library in my honor, you know. Meanwhile, there's no exhibits because he's overturned all of them.
It's like the Palestinian museum, you know.
Yeah, there's nothing there. He's got to hate Trump. So that's why. So he hates Trump. He's got to get revenge. And boy, did he get revenge. Between him and Hillary, they wiped out Trump. Trump made a tremendous mistake.
Which is?
I'll tell you what the mistake was.
Yeah.
And he realized that, but he fell. He said to Hillary when they were campaigning, they were debating, he said, boy, wait till I'm president, I'm going to go after you.
Right.
You committed felonies. He didn't.
Right.
He underestimated the evil of Hillary. He underestimates the evil of the Democratic Party, the secret state, Hillary, and they got him. I mean, everybody knows now, Hillary was responsible for the dossier. She paid for it. She got him back. You know, it's not enough to satisfy her because she's another megalomaniac and she wants to be president. You can't believe the pain she's going through because she's not president. So she's going to get him, and she got him back. They destroyed Trump, all of them. You know, the Democratic Party through Pelosi and Schumer, right? They're wiping the guy. They're trying to wipe him out. It's not working, you see. But that's why. So Obama hates Trump because of what Trump did to him. He has no legacy. He's a poor president, very poor. You know, he's so busy golfing. I think he spent more time in the history of the United States on the golf course than he did as a president.
I think there was a year in his presidency he golfed more than some of the top golfers in the PGA.
In the PGA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But one of the things regarding Trump and his role is, did Trump understand that initially? Because there's this famous picture when he won the election of him looking shocked. So there's a certain level, I don't know if Trump really believed he was going to win. Once he realized that he has a certain role, does that, when things kick in, where you guys, he's probably messed up the process?
I want to tell you something which most people don't know. Something was told to me because Trump was losing at 4 o'clock. So I know somebody told me this who was there, right? So at 4 o'clock, Ivanka spoke to him and said, Dad, we're not making it. It's over, you know? And Trump said, listen, I tried my best. At 2 a.m., he won, right? And I'll tell you what the real story was. Because a couple of months before, this was told to me by a guy who was there. You know, so let me just tell you what happened. So by 2 a.m. he won, right? It's a Nes Nigla. It's an open miracle that he won. I mean, Hillary had everything set up to celebrate.
She had the losing speech.
Oh, she had everything, right? At 2 a.m. So what does Trump do after he won, right? So he goes into a room, and this guy was there. That's how I know, you know. Goes into a room, goes on to one side of the room, he starts crying. Imagine Donald Trump.
Trump crying, wow.
I mean, it's like, huh? You know, it's like the Sultan putting on tzitzis. He's crying, you know, because he realized it was a miracle. I'll tell you why. And then Steve Bannon went into the same room. He goes to the other corner, and he's crying. Why? Because it was a nest. They knew it was a miracle. You know why? Because several months before, something happened which made it impossible for Trump to win. I don't know what that was, you know? And Trump realized, whatever it was, whatever the political situation was, it's impossible to win. And all of a sudden, as time went on, these things that made it impossible for him, right, dissolved by itself, on its own. And he knew it was a miracle. I mean, I don't know what it was, but he knew it was miraculous that it dissolved. That's why he knew. I mean, he realized it's finished, you know. And all of a sudden, these things which would prevent him from being president dissolved on their own. It's called an act of God, because God wants him in, which is what I, you know. And that's why when he won at 2 a.m., he went into one corner and Steve Bannon went into the other corner and they both started crying, you know. And I gave a shir, right, which is interesting. And there was a second shir I gave about Trump after I revealed what I know about Trump. So I gave a shir and said the first mistake that Trump made a tremendous mistake. You know what that was? When he went out to declare victory, right? He probably had like 2 billion people watching this, right? Because everybody wanted to know, right? why didn't he give credit to God?
Right.
Remember Yosef HaTzadik with Paro, standing in Parapara, God reveals the dreams. Yeah, if you knew it was a miracle, to such extent where you're sitting there crying, so how can we not say, I have to thank God, who's the only one that could have done this for me, What a Kiddush Hashem, a sanctification of the name of God. Oh, it was incredible. He didn't mention God, not in that speech. Later on he did. Yeah, but this was the speech to do it, because the whole world was watching you. Didn't do it. Mistake.
Maybe when 2024 he'll do it that time.
Well, he has mentioned God many times, yes.
Right.
But the key was that first, because everybody was watching. Can you imagine your audience that wants to hear the victory speech of this guy?
Okay, this is the Ari Lewis Show, and our guest today is Rabbi Kessin. So, Rabbi Kessin, you touched
Rabbi Mendel Kessin.
Yes, Rabbi Mendel Kessin, because they're the Rabbi Kessin out there, obviously. You touched briefly the concept of Roe versus Wade in the United States.
Yes.
You like that what happened. One of the things that's confusing is now, but the power, not federal now, it goes to the states.
Right.
So you still look at that as an advantage.
As a what?
As an advantage. This is a good thing, you would say.
Yeah. One of the problems of America, besides homosexuality, right, which is a terrible deviation of gender and so on, which is what Asa did. He was into Isha Sesh, at least not men, but he was into women, everybody else's wife. But anyway, Esav is a Ritzeach, he's a murderer. He's known for that,
Murder on his bar mitzvah.
What?
Murder on his bar mitzvah.
Well, yeah, because that was 15, right? Committed those 5 sins. But anyway, one of the problems of Esav is that, like I said, he's a murderer. One of the problems of America, which is Esav, it's the good part of Esav, right, is that they're murderers. This is a terrible thing, you see. When they murder, they infanticide. They kill kids. Do you know how many kids have been killed since 1973? Roe versus Wade, 49 years?
How many?
66 million children have been aborted, which means they've been murdered. So that's a terrible indictment against America, for which America suffers greatly. And this part of it, what's happening now, is a suffering. So in a certain sense, the worst part of this, Roe versus Wade, is that it's been federalized. So by overturning the ability of the federal to permit this, so now it goes to the state legislatures, and many states will certainly limit, maybe to the first trimester, but many states will altogether forbade this. So it's tshuva. It's a certain level of the restoration of morality, and not murder. America's murderers, which is astounding what they're doing. Abortion is murder. And there are people that want to say even after you gave birth, you can murder the kid within the same day. It's unbelievable, But it's certainly up to the moment of birth, you can kill the kid, even though it's a fully functioning, viable human.
But
so that is tshuva.
But this is happening under Biden. So why is that happening when Biden's doing these things that he's competent, these things are working out, but this thing happened?
Because what Biden is, and this is very important to focus on, and I mentioned this, Biden is collapsing.
Okay.
Part of the collapse is the restoration of good.
Okay. Ironically, by the way, these are Trump appointees that caused this anyway. It wasn't like Biden caused this to happen.
Of course, it's not.
The question is, why is it happening under Biden? And you're going to say because...
Yeah, well, according to Pelosi, the Cardinal of San Francisco denies her the sacraments.
Wow.
Because she's fully for abortion.
Right.
The amazing thing is how he could meet the Pope, and the Pope did not say, and Biden is a tremendous supporter of abortion. How could the Pope give him sacraments or whatever he gave him? He should have ostracized him. He should have excommunicated the President of the United States. Because according to Christianity, abortion is murder. They hold it's murder.
Right.
So, and Biden is a Roman Catholic. So excuse me, you committing murder every day because you are supporting and sponsoring, right, murder of infants. So why didn't we excommunicate him? Because, it's the old story, he's President of the United States. But really, how's he going to face Jesus? Yeah, according to him, right? He's not going to face God. You're a murderer, that's what you are. You're the president. You could put a stop to it, if you wanted to. But of course not. It's a big supporter of abortion. So Pelosi, they excommunicated. That, but they denied the sacraments, which according to them means you don't get Olam Haba.
Right. One of the things I want to point out, though, so the idea that this could maybe jumpstart where things could get more positive in America?
Yes.
Okay.
We are seeing, that's the good news.
Okay.
The good news is that apparently justice is being satisfied to the extent where the decree of suffering is ending to a certain extent because we are coming closer to the redemption.
Okay.
That's why.
So maybe gas prices go down a bit?
Well, it's not so much. Well, what it really is the Congress will become Republican.
Okay.
I just hope. The problem is that, you see, I'm not even talking about the evil of the Democratic Party. What these guys are doing is beyond belief. But the Republicans, they're all wimps. I don't know who runs that party. What's the name of the Speaker of the House?
McConnell.
Who?
McConnell.
Oh, that's the Senate.
Oh,
what's the other guy? They're all wimps.
McCarthy, yeah.
McCarthy, yeah. They're wimps. They don't stand up. They don't have the same resolve to do good that the Democrats have to do evil. They just don't, which is a terrible indictment against Congress. And you should know one thing. In a certain sense, I feel sorry for the whole United States government. They don't understand something. They think because they represent the United States that they can commit acts of evil. No, they can't. You're not better. God commands all mankind. Just because you represent a government doesn't mean you can do evil. You have to obey the moral law individually, privately, and also as a public figure that represents the government. You can't just do evil. They don't understand. I'll give you one example. Biden. He's talking about gun laws, right? Especially what happened in Texas. Yeah, right? So he's saying,
yes.
what?
The school shooting in Texas.
Who?
The school shooting.
Yeah, in Texas, right? So Biden is a big tzaddik, right? Oh, you have to have gun laws. The guy's an absolute moron. Why? Because it's not guns that kill. It's gunmen that kill. That's the MS. But the incredible thing is, you are acting with kindness and mercy, right? Because you're bothered by the death of how many people? 21 people, whatever, which was an act of terrible murder. There are 120,000 people, right, that died from fentanyl overdose because of what's happening in the southern border. And you're the guy bringing in all the immigrants. All the illegals are because of Biden's order, right? And many people coming in, they're selling fentanyl like crazy. And 120,000 American citizens died from overdose. Who contributes to this? Biden. Because you could stop it. Not only stop it, you're the one that encourages it by having these guys come in. So the ones who are taking advantage of the southern border, the hole in the wall there and so on, right, is the, what do you call those, the Mexican cartel. What are you doing? So when Biden gets up there in front of God, God says, I understand you. You're commiserating, right, with people that died, 21 people, and you're trying to show everybody gun control. You're a murderer. You contributed to the murder of 120,000 people who died from the fentanyl coming over that border. Where were you? I gave you the power to stop it. Not only have you not stopped it, you encourage it. In fact, you created the whole situation when these guys are coming over the border. Does Biden have any idea what God is going to do to him?
Actually, he probably doesn't.
Of course he doesn't. No, he does. He doesn't care. You don't realize who Biden is. He doesn't care. He's a corrupt thief. He's paid off by Moscow, by China, by Ukraine. It's all documented. I'm not even talking about that his son is an absolute oizvov. His son, a hunter, what these guys are. They're all perverts. It's beyond belief. What kind of family? You compare his family, Biden's family, to Trump's family. It's like, heaven and hell, Biden has no concept. Going don't understand that God looks at everybody, not only the one who did the crime, but anybody in the chain of causality that can be held as any type of cause is guilty of murder, maybe not the same level as the one who did it. So Biden understands he's guilty of murder because he contributed to the death of 120,000 people for nothing. You see, Does he understand this? And he's running around screaming, gun control, because he's the great saint. I'm just saying, the behavior of these people is beyond belief. The contradictions, the hypocrisy, the evil of these people is beyond belief. How low they can stoop. It's almost like they're not human. They're animal in human clothing. Where's your compassion for guys taking fentanyl? And you could stop it. And you're the cause of why it's coming into the border. That alone will send Biden to hell for eternity. And there's no such thing as hell for eternity anyway. Just a terrible mistake people make. But that alone will indict him for years of suffering. He's a murderer. And he's president of the United States. You see? And God gave him the power to stop it. Let's stop it. He's the one who initiated the whole thing. I'm just showing you the evil of Esav. Because there's a tremendous contest. There's the good part of Esav, which is Trump trying to help America and be moral. And there's the evil part of Esav, which are the liberals, the Democratic Party, the progressive. Schumer. Schumer's incredible. I don't want to get into him. And Pelosi and these people are just beyond belief. But listen, it'll all get paid back. Every inch of what the evil these people do will get paid back.
And last question I want to ask you is that this year obviously is a Shemitah year. Sukkot, next Sukkot will be after Shemitah, and it's that generally I understand it's a very special time. Any Sukkot after Shemitah.
Yeah, because if I remember correctly, Omar Rovo says in the Gemara, I think it's Sanhedrin, that the Mashiach comes at the Mitzvah Shemitah, at the end of Shemitah.
Right.
That's a restart.
So potential opportune time. And he says Zohar within 8 years, and so
you add them all up together. It's
But we're not making a prediction.
Especially with the election, they just announced October 22nd, which is about a week after Shmini Atzeres. Yeah, after Shmini Atzeres.
Yeah,
so
after Shmini Atzeres, yeah. But I want to tell you something. That's all the bad news. But I want to tell you something. The world has no idea what's about to happen. Because we are talking about the redemption. We're not talking about a historical event like some type of new history, We're talking about a geula, a redemption of mankind. But it's more than that. It's a redemption of the creation itself. It's the end of the program. You see? Which is incredible when you think about that. And therefore, the Messianic era is an era that nobody can understand. Nobody. It is something of such unbelievable magnificence in terms of its divinity. And what is very important is God has to prepare the world for this. You can't go from darkness into light. You're blinded. God has to prepare. Mankind needs preparation. So there has to be spectacular changes in the world. And there is a verse, a pasuk in Nitzavim, very important pasuk. And here's what God says. Even if your exiles be at the end of heaven, okay, that's what God says. Even if your exiles, the Jewish people, they're at the ends of heaven, they're spread all over the planet. And Jews are spread all over the planet. So God says, Misham, from there, the ends of heaven, right, I will gather you. Not from Israel, from the ends of heaven. In the exile itself, I will gather you. 1. Yikochecho, I will bring you to me. And then Veheviacho, I will bring you to Israel. That means, what did God do in Egypt? God entered Egypt and destroyed them. Right? Same thing. The redemption is going to begin in America itself. Through all the world, that God is going to somehow change the Jewish consciousness, you see, and bring the redemption itself in preparation. And that's what it means. He will gather you. He's going to take the Jewish people and separate them. That's what it means to gather from the world itself. So that's the first spectacular historical event. The second historical event is that he will bring them to him, and that's Torah. He's going to bring them an unbelievable spirit of spirituality. We don't know what that is. Consciousness will change in the world. And then he's going to bring them all to Israel. That means the redemption begins in the exile itself. now. And this is what's going to happen. So these events are so spectacular. They are so historic that we cannot even conceive. How's God going to bring all the Jews back? You know? I just read a statistic, for instance. They estimate there's 15.1 million Jews in the world. How many religious ones are there? Torah observant? 2 million. That means 13 million Jews are not Torah observant. That is an absolute disaster because of the assimilation, the intermarriage, and so on. And God is going to turn all of that around in an event that we cannot even begin to understand. I suspect maybe the way it's going to happen, and it's speculation on my part, because it says in the Gemara, the Talmud, Yerushalmi, Masechta Ma'aseh Sheni, that this third Beis Hamikdash will be built before Mashiach ben David comes. That's interesting. Most people think that he's going to build it. No. And you never know. And that third Beis Hamikdash is going to come down from heaven. Could you imagine all of a sudden one day you wake up and you're looking at the old city and there's a third Beis Hamikdash because it comes down, right? What do you think the news will be in all the papers of the entire world? Miraculous! There's no more mosque, right? It's the third Beis Hamikdash. It's unbelievable.
Well, we don't know how CNN would report that. But
No, but even they will have to say, this is a miracle, you know? And then everybody's going to come to see, what is this? But you don't understand, it's not the third Beis Hamikdash. Here's what it means. We know there's a Beis Hamikdash on top in heaven that corresponds to the Beis Hamikdash, place of the Beis Hamikdash here. So that third Beis Hamikdash is the heavenly Beis Hamikdash that descends. That's what it is. It's not a human Beis Hamikdash. It's the heavenly Beis Hamikdash, which parallels the original, that actually descends. Now, we know the Beis Hamikdash is the residence of God, where the divine presence is. So it comes out, right? What kind of divine presence is going to be on the heavenly Beis Hamikdash when it comes down? And the answer is, it's going to be the magnitude of that divine presence will be something that is in heaven. Could you imagine the power of the divine presence when it actually comes down and reveals itself to mankind? That's going to wake up the consciousness of every single Jew.
Wow. Well, good times ahead, Mr. Hashem. And our guest today has been Rabbi Mendel Kessin. So, Rabbi, if people want to see more of your work.
Yes, I can be found 3 places. Yeah, I got about, there's about 400 shurim on YouTube. Mendel Kessin, Google more Mendel Kessin, and I'm on YouTube. And then I'm also on Torah Anytime, which is a website. But then what's interesting, I have my own website, which is TorahThinking.org. And on that website, again, you have hundreds. You can listen to my shul. There are videos and there are audios. But one of the interesting things is that my lectures are now being transcribed. And you can print them out and read them.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
okay.
That's incredible. Yeah. If you don't want to read it, you can read it. Or copy it and send it to people or whatever. But they're now transcribed.
All right.
Yeah.
Excellent. So a lot of opportunities to
So
learn.
it's free, yeah.
Audio, like to read. There's different ways to go online. And check out Rabbi Mendel Kessin. And this has been another episode of the Ari Lewis Show. If you like what you watch or don't like what you watch, you can put comments. We're going to also put this on Rumble as well, Mr. Hashem. And if you also like the work that Svi and I are doing, well, we have more shows coming up. And contact us. We have some ideas that we like to hear from our audience as well, see what they like for us to move forward. So thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, everyone, for watching. This has been a great show and a great day. And God bless and good night.